All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing this great work with us. I really feel, honored to engage this material. Uh, one thing that I'll just jump in. One thing that really struck me about this piece was that social practice and performance. It tends to create a kind of stage for democracy, or for something like democracy. And obviously, at this moment, when so many of our supposedly democratic institutions are broken or are in a state of crisis, I feel that works like this, provide a real opportunity for us to think about what democracy is, what politics can be, um, and also to think about how how democracy can fail certain people, or how what we call democracy can fail certain people in our society.
Absolutely.
I wonder if you could sort of speak to that and introduce the project and, along those lines.
So, in terms of democracy, um, you know, a lot of our projects, and We the People is a democracy, right? This little kind of haven. And even though I'm the curator and the way that we've set up the projects, they're kind of owned by different people. The truth is that the projects grow and get richer, more interesting, and they get to kind of the root of the problem and the root of the truth that we're trying to look at and discuss. It gets richer when we're all collaborating. So Barbarians at the Gate, I'm the curator, and yet it wouldn't exist if it weren't because Michael and Jasmine started talking about voting rights, and Jasmine's project about the sticker, and I do not vote, or I don't get to vote, prompted me to start thinking in these lines. And when I proposed the project, it was with their inspiration in mind. So to begin with, it was already kind of a democratic process to get to this project. We were also thinking a lot about the word democracy and the definition of it, and how democracy supposedly puts the power in the hands of the people. And us as the people, we felt that at this moment in time, uh, it was it was not just our duty, but our responsibility, our right. It was important that we exercise this democracy, and in the public, and not just behind closed doors or as a conversation among us, but to expand it to the public sphere, and that was a way in which we could exercise our voice. And there was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, yes. There was also a lot of talk about, we as immigrants, and uh, some other Americans might see us as unpatriotic in the way that we were questioning American democracy. And the opposite was true for us. I felt that questioning is a patriotic thing to do. In the act of questioning, we actually there's a seed that claims that there's something better. That in the question we can arrive to better ideas.
Yeah, Jasmine and I were talking about how with voting, so many of the people whose lives are most affected by government policy are shut out from voting for various reasons, right? And I think here too, maybe a group of people who aren't fully enfranchised are nevertheless doing the responsible thing and pushing us to think about what democracy is, right?
Yeah. In fact, as we discussed earlier, putting a project into the public sphere leaves a lot to we don't have any control over it anymore, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And that vulnerability and that sense of reality was something that we were eager and at the same time worried and apprehensive about. What if nobody shows up? What if nobody is interested in participating? And at the same time, we were thinking about the idea of how many people have the right to vote in the United States and they don't exercise it. So they don't come to the door, they don't come to this responsible moment. And we were wondering about that. So we had set up a series of questions, thinking that when people came to our gate, we would ask them, "Do you live in a democracy?" As we handed them a pebble, and then ask them to go through the gate, right into this. The gate being a symbol of a liminal space that creates democracy, and vote very transparently. Vote in regards to who gets to vote in the United States. Um, the conversations never went as linear as that. That they actually were all over the place. And one of the first people, or the first groups of people to come to the piece, were a group of Latin American nannies, uh, women of color with white babies in their arms. And at first they hadn't realized that we spoke Spanish as well. So they were having a private conversation in Spanish about voting rights and about the fact that they don't have a vote, and how do they feel, what would be the responsible way of attaining the vote in the United States. And then when they realized that we spoke Spanish, instead of shying away, the conversation just exploded and got even more interesting.
Yeah.
And they were really engaged with taking it seriously, right? It wasn't just a game.
Yeah. Yeah, it really shows how these projects, which take place outside of you know, outside of the polling place, right, can do a lot of the work that we think is taking place in our more formal deliberations. And that what this story you just told of these nannies also makes me think about city space and how San Francisco is, supposedly this extremely inclusive environment and is sort of a safe haven for lots of people from different backgrounds. And there's many immigrant communities here. On the other hand, it's also become prohibitively expensive and in many ways is sort of conservative in certain respects. So was that something that you noticed in out there in the park?
Yes, we thought a lot about where we wanted to have the performance. And at first, I live in Pacifica, very close to Lindemar Beach, which is where Gaspar de Portola first landed, and it was the first place where Spaniards arrived, climbed up the hill, and saw what was San Francisco Bay later. So I very often do performances on my beach, because I think of this place as a place of colonialism, and as a place of kind of the birth of colonialism for this area. So at some point I had thought, we should do this in Pacifica. But then we were thinking about San Francisco as this place that prides itself in being this progressive city, and in a place where we think a lot about the melting pot and the salad bowl ideas behind a blended community, right? A blended, culturally diverse community. And we thought, no, I think we'll get a more interesting reaction in San Francisco. We also commented on, how would this work in other parts of the country? And some of our friends and family members were concerned and saying, well, it might be scary if you try this somewhere else. But in any case, we ended up deciding on a public space in San Francisco, for a number of reasons. One of them was because this idea of the title, Barbarians at the Gates, and San Francisco being, the Golden Gate being right there. So when you walked through our gate, you could see the Golden Gate right behind you. And we also thought of San Francisco having this reputation of the progressive city, having the reputation of being the birthplace of the hippies in the 60s, and right across the bay, Oakland being the birthplace of the Black Panthers in the same time. Freedom of speech rallies and protests in Berkeley. We have this history in this city. And yet, in the last 4 decades, the city has gotten richer and richer and matter, if you will,
Yeah.
and less hungry, right? Less interested in change and in true dialogue, and more kind of protective of what it has, the wealth that it has accumulated. So we thought it would be interesting, uh, to see what kind of reaction we would get, because San Francisco tends to be, I mean, we're still a sanctuary city, right? We tend to talk a lot about progressive ideals, but does that translate into progressive
Yeah,
actions?
right. That's great. I love also what you say about, election day this year, obviously being really charged and being so much anxiety and even fear about existing in public.
Yeah.
But it seems that you were able to sort of use that energy in a sense, or, before when we talked before, you mentioned that performance necessitates vulnerability. And so maybe there was something special in the air that made this such an effective project.
I think people wanted to engage with us.
Yeah,
And again, this idea of vulnerability and performance is something that really resonates with me. I love it. I find that there's so much that we can explore when we put ourselves out there in a moment of unknown, right? And um, I had tried, or we had tried to control certain aspects of this. We had come up with sign up sheets that, come and meet us at a certain time. And there was this like Google sheet that you could come and sign up for. And people signed up for it, but then didn't follow that schedule and showed up whenever they were going to show up. And I would think it was once we accepted the vulnerability and accepted that, the whole exercise, not only Barbarians at the Gate, but democracy, requires a certain vulnerability and a certain acceptance of um, a larger, uh, let's say, interaction, a larger interaction with more people, right? And not being able to control any of that was something that really resonated with us too. So I was, I personally, but I know that my fellow We the People members, several times during the day, we felt the importance of what we are doing, that we as artists are serving as, like cultural investigators, so that people in the future can look back and listen to diverse voices about what it was like to live through an amazingly tumultuous political time in the United States, along with pandemic and everything that we're going through right now.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I mean, yeah, what a perfect sort of way to mark this occasion. Um, I wonder, you were saying earlier about how San Francisco tends to like proclaim how sort of progressive it is. And I was thinking about the San Francisco Art Institute and how it too, it declares itself to be international and inclusive and progressive and so on. But, this year we've just seen a lot of, I don't know, it's been a challenging situation, I think, for everyone connected to the school this year, right?
Yes,
Um,
it has.
yeah,
So yes. So we originally, when we first thought about this idea of a gate, and the gate being this liminal transformational space, we have envisioned the 1-800, I'm sorry, no, not 1-800, 800 Chestnut Street, and the doors open, right? And we were hoping that that would be the liminal space, that we would just be standing there, inviting people into the courtyard. And SFAI, we had a few deliberations. At first, there was a tentative yes, and then finally, due to COVID restrictions, SFAI felt that they couldn't allow us to do that. And at that moment, we talked about this, and we decided, you know what, that's actually kind of even more important. And the fact that now SFAI is kind of symbolizing official power, or those in power, and we are being denied that umbrella of officialness, if you will,
yeah,
by being denied the space. gave us an extra boost. And all of a sudden we were more interested in creating this project and in creating this space and moving forward. So having said that, I think SFAI, along with a lot of institutions in our societies, have been in denial as to, they have wonderful, really beautifully written mission statements, and of inclusion and of democracy, if you will. But then the actual actions don't really match the words. And perhaps, this moment, this pandemic exacerbated all of that and brought it bubbling up to the forefront. And so I'm going to say that personally, even though we're going through so many obstacles at the moment, I tend to see obstacles as opportunities. And the fact that we're now being more engaged, not willing to kind of look the other way, but really addressing issues of race and issues of inequities, in so many different layers of society. I think it's an opportunity to make a real change. So for me, the biggest disappointment would be if nothing changes from here on out.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I so agree, and I feel like this, your group, We the People, and some of the other kind of conversations that have been coming out from the Art Institute this year, I think have really, realized its potential and kind of said, okay, this is where the mission is located, right? Or this is the practice that needs to kind of unfold from,
Yeah.
this
So
moment.
as you know, we have a Reimagine committee going on right now, and we're taking it very seriously. Trying to address so many different layers of institutional reform, and who do we want to be? We have this beautiful history, and we were talking about this the other day, about the idea of radical histories and radical communities, which SFAI can claim to have been, but are we still a radical community? And if so, what does radical mean? Who, what kind of radicality, or let's define that further. So I think it all kind of ties in together.
Yeah, definitely. Um, it's a part of this idea of like picking up democracy, right? Or when it falls, who will be there, as you asked. Yeah.
So this sentence in particular, again, kind of rose from this idea of labor and the value of labor. This is something that has been present in my work as well as in several of the We the People participants. So who is the who does the labor, and is the labor valued in our society? So we wanted some kind of labor action going on, and that was where we decided to be printing constantly. So someone was printing, screen printing constantly. And also, as you may know, screen printing, the image starts to deteriorate if you're not cleaning, and the elements that we're outdoors, right? It's sunny, it's warm, or it's windy. All of this is going to start affecting the inks. So our hands are getting dirty, and the image is starting to deteriorate as well. And instead of stopping and cleaning, we just kept on moving, so that message was also alive and showing how it progressed through time, how it kind of got muddled along the way. The idea of democracy, the idea of us being democracy, that democracy just doesn't happen. We need to make it happen. And also we had deliberated quite a bit about what exactly was that message. Michael Martinez was the one who said, I love the action of when democracy falls and actually having something fall. There's a bit of humor in it, and there's also an action, there's a direct action. So again, this idea that the project itself was very democratic and very much got richer as we had these big conversations, is embodied there.
Yeah, I love what you say about the moment of it, or I guess Michael's idea about like the sort of moment of the fall, or this moment of crisis, or a shift taking place, and how it's this tremendous opening that requires labor and commitment and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easy to complain,
Mhm.
um, but then what? There just stopping at the complaint is not enough.
Yeah.
So um, so hopefully, um, moving beyond the complaint and realizing that democracy only happens when we are engaged, and when we want to be part of it, and that we do have agency. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if you could share a few more stories from the day.
Yes. So one of the stories that was fascinating to me was, these two women, kind of middle-aged joggers.
Mhm.
Uh, Fort Mason, the area in Fort Mason is a pretty wealthy part of San Francisco. They looked like they probably lived in the neighborhood. And one of them was white and the other one was Asian. And they stopped, and, asked us, what are you doing? And we invited them to participate. And they, at first, kind of came in, uh, just kind of enjoying the idea of participating in this weird little art piece, right? That these strange artists are doing this thing in San Francisco, whatever. It's as they were walking through the threshold, uh, one of the women turns to the other and says, I'm not a US citizen. I didn't vote today. And they look at each other and they start talking about, we've been friends for this long time. What do you mean you're not I had no idea you're not a citizen. And one of the women was about to put her pebble in one of the containers. And as you can see from our photos, the containers are transparent. And each of the containers had a label as to who you claim deserves the vote or deserves the right to vote. And she was about to put her pebble into one of the containers. And when her friend said, I'm not a US citizen, I did not get to vote today, she drew back and held on to her pebble. And they had this big conversation about, well, why not? And you've lived here for so long. You mean you're not eligible? Have you not done but you're a resident. And what, one of each of the vessels, one of them said, the vote is given to all who pay taxes. Another one of the labels was, the vote should be for anyone residing in this land. And the third one said, votes are just for citizens, but there's an easier path to citizenship. And at the end, they had maybe like a 10-minute discussion right there in front of us, in front of the gate, but neither one voted. They took their pebble again and they just put them on the ground in front of the three vessels and left. So people took it seriously, right? There was also a moment in which this other man came up and he was about to vote. And then when he realized we were all there, right, we're all watching, and the containers are transparent, he said, but you're going to see what I vote for. And we said, yes, we are actually interested in transparency. And and then he kind of put his body in between us and the containers, uncomfortable with the idea that his vote was going to be so obvious.
Mhm.
And then, as I said before, the Latin American, the group of Latin American nannies who came and had this wonderful conversation about who they are. And they were even talking about, like, what category do they fit? They pay taxes, but is that enough? Is that just based on money then? So the people who pay taxes get to vote. Well, does that mean just in capitalist society, right? Then it's all tied to capitalism. Um, uh, and they were talking about the definitions of resident versus citizen from their own perspectives. Yeah, that was the kind of thing that we were engaged in that day.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I wonder, I was also going to ask about the question, do we live in a democracy? Which I don't, was that something that you posed that day or?
Yes, yes. So we discussed this, right? The United States is a republic, but it is based on democratic principles. So we discussed that, and we were thinking, okay, we live in a democracy, but it's flawed, and we were looking back at the original Greek and Roman definitions of democracy, and the idea that this was a government of the people and that the people get to vote, right? That's kind of the bare bones idea of democracy. And back in Roman and Greek times, who was that citizen, right? So we were looking back at that and realizing that a citizen was someone, one, born inside the city walls, two, male, and three, a man of wealth. It was usually a landowner. So this excluded, of course, foreigners, poor people, and women. And we're talking thousands of years ago, right? So then we were looking at different definitions, or how maybe the definition of citizen, the definition of voting rights and of democracy, that started changing. And it was really disheartening for me, for all of us, to think that, we're celebrating, and I really say that kind of loosely, we're celebrating women's suffrage this year, right? 100th anniversary of women's suffrage around the world. If I'm not mistaken, New Zealand was the first country to allow women the vote, and it was in 1919. And then in 1920, the United States followed suit, along with many other countries. But that's just 100 years ago, right? It took thousands of years for women to have the right to vote. And that's only white women, right? It's only been about 55 years since women of color have been able to vote in this country. So when we think about that, about what has changed, okay, there's been change. You don't have to be a landowner anymore, but not enough has changed, right? And the fact that the little change that has happened took so many thousands of years to occur was a wake up call to all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I guess I would love to hear a little bit about working in a collective at this time of social distancing, and we all, like we were talking before, this is a time with a lot of anxiety too. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
So I don't know if you know this. The whole idea of the collective started with Jessie, and she was interested in kind of curating a group of artists, if you will, artists who had certain things in common. One of them was that we were all immigrants, in not necessarily in the same fashion. For instance, I was born here, but I'm a first generation American, and I lived kind of back and forth because of my parents' jobs. I lived back and forth between Costa Rica and the United States all my life. Michael was born here, but he's a child of the border, right? Michael is a Texan and has grown up with the borders in his blood. The rest of our group is all relatively newly arrived immigrants. So the idea started with Jessie, and at first we were just meeting online, and once we realized that the group was actually really strong, committed, hardworking, that we were able to put our egos aside and work collectively, instead of kind of owning things and being protective of our intellectual property, if you will. There was a sense of collaborativeness that we wanted. And personally, I thought that it had to do in a way with the pandemic. We were all so isolated and working in our own bubbles and in our own vacuums that all of a sudden having this collaboration was just like an infusion of life again. It was really wonderful. And it made us realize that we're still here, right? And we're still connected, and there's still a lot that we want to and can do. We've been extremely responsible, and most of the time we're working online and just meeting in Zoom like we are right now. The few times that we have met in person, we've all gotten COVID tests, we've all social distanced, and so but as I said, I think that human connection was something that we all wanted and has had an enormous positive mark on our collaborations.
Well, I mean, it's so wonderful to hear you say all these things about not just about this project, but about that is not just about Barbarians, but about We the People, and also, practice more generally in this moment that we're living through. And I wonder, do you have any other things to share about this project that you want to say?
I think that this project was able to exist because of the collaborative nature, because of the fact that there's 7 of us. I felt supported from in terms of, when I proposed, hey, let's do this. And I think that all of us would probably say the same thing. Each one of us has proposed somewhat harebrained ideas, or some crazy things that take us out of our comfort zone. And what I've met with was an environment of positivity around that, and everyone saying, okay, yeah, so what do I need to do? How do I participate? And I had actually been, for many years, thinking about liminal spaces and really liking the idea of erecting a door somewhere, and the threshold being this space of transformation. And for whatever reason, I had never done it by myself. And with the support of the rest of the group, I felt empowered to move forward with it.
Well, thank you so much. This was wonderful.